Welcome to the O'Connor Professional Group's presentation of our family-focused philosophy. The origin of this presentation was that I wanted to record a training session about how O'Connor Professional Group's philosophy and family-focused philosophy developed and what its basic principles are. And then I realized that I had been doing a presentation for treatment programs, for recovery advocacy groups, and for other organizations for decades now. And yet I had never recorded it, and I thought this was the opportunity. So you are my faithful guests on this particular presentation. If you have questions, just raise your hand or put a question in the chat room. I'm happy to do that, but we are recording this. So let's begin. Part one, what happened to the IP? An IP means, in a family systems perspective, the identified patient, because in essence, the whole family is the patient or the identified person. So what happened to the IP, the identified person? Who is struggling in the family system overtly? Oh, only about 25 million people in the United States, and that was pre-COVID. 25 million people in the United States struggle with substance use disorders. And for every one of those people, they estimate there are 4 to 5 others struggling with their disorders. So we've got 25 million people struggling in and of themselves, and another 100 million struggling with somebody else's struggle. And yet we do not get nearly the attention it deserves, nor the resources it is warranted. And what we also know is that early experimentation for IPs increase the odds that somebody will struggle with a substance use disorder later, because the teen brain is under construction. So if we could keep our kids, our culture, from encouraging kids to use alcohol or experiment with any other substance until the age of 21, their odds go down to about 9% of having a substance use disorder. If they start at 13, the odds are at 47%. So it's all about, how do we do prevention? How do we do a cultural shift? Because we live in a culture of addiction. We don't just live in families of substance use problems. You can't go to a city where there's billboards without seeing billboards for alcohol. Driving down the highways, you see trucks with beer bottles on them. Watching TV, the characters of all of my favorite Law and Order people drink at the end of a shift. We are inundated with messaging about substance use. And so we would have to do a whole lot to change that. But what we do know is that until that changes, we need to do our best to make it later and later. And substance use disorders, according to the American Society of Addictive Medicine, among other criteria, are chronic. That means lifelong, not something that somebody goes to a 30-day program, comes out and goes, cured, all better. No, it is chronic. Think diabetes, think hypertension. It is management that results in long-term asymptomatic behavior. Neurobiology, it has a neurobiological component. So we'll talk about that in a minute, with genetic and environmental factors. Again, families are one environmental factor. Our culture is another environmental factor. So what does the neurobiological component mean? By the way, I am a total neuro geek. I love talking about the tiny little bit I understand about neurology and neurobiology. So this is a neuron, and see all those little fingers that are coming off those neurons? The basic premise is this. Let's pretend this little thing is a neuron of that. When somebody starts thinking about something, and particularly something that changes their brain in a really dramatic way, a neuron lights up. And the next time that person gave that memory or that incident focus and thought, another neuron lights up and it connects to the last one. Fire together, wire together. So our brains are shaped by what we think about. These neurons connect to each other, making neural networks and neural pathways that over time shape the brain. The case of the person who has been thinking and focusing on alcohol, let's use that substance for instance, for many, many decades, and then just stops without any brain retraining, is still clamping down on that thinking because the neural network remains. The goal of recovery is to build a different neural network. So if one person comes into our practices or our families and they have a neural network of addiction, because remember, like things create neural pathways. So the kid who smokes marijuana at the party and goes, wow, I feel better. I feel more connected. People seem to like me more. The next time he thinks that, he's connecting one neuron to the next and another neuron. And every time he thinks about it, he is again forming a neural pathway. When he starts thinking more and more, how do I get it? How do I get away with it? How do I compensate for it? That neural pathway grows even more. So unless there is some simple changing going on in the corollary area of their brains, this neural pathway will remain unless they stop using it. So the expression back in the day of a dry drunk was somebody who had the neural pathway of somebody with an addictive disorder, but simply didn't have the time or brain retraining to lose or shrink that neural pathway, because the opposite of fire together, wire together in neurobiology is use it or lose it. And we have all used neural pathways. Those who knit and focus on color develop real intricate neural networks in the right side of the brain. Somebody who is focusing on mathematical principles is developing neural pathways in the left side of their brain. So what we know is that brains change. If you were a real person in arts and letters like I was throughout my educational years, and the mathematical principles just simply waned for me, the idea of doing algebra looks like fungo. I could no more do an algebraic equation than I could run a marathon tomorrow, and I couldn't run a marathon tomorrow. So because of the neural network principle of use it or lose it. So in the substance use and addictive behavior and in brain retraining, we are looking for somebody to supplement that original neural network with different kinds of thinking. Like, what kind of meeting do I go to? How do I give back to the community? How do I meditate? How do I exercise kindness activities? All of the things that activate different areas of the brain. And the original one has the possibility of shrinking, and this one grows. The more we focus on something, the more it embeds and the more it grows. It's like the story of the two wolves. The Native American brave says to the elder, grandfather, I've got two wolves in my head. One that is mean and angry and nasty and jealous, and one that is kind and loving and generous. And what I want to know, grandfather, is which wolf lives. And the elder says, after a pause, because all wise elders pause before speaking, the one you feed is the one that lives. And that is true for any kind of brain change. The more we feed with thoughts and energy and focus, the more the pathway grows. When we stop thinking about that and focus on something else, we're changing our brains. So the way it is encapsulated is in what might be called a triune theory. We have three separate brains: primitive brain, midbrain, frontal brain, just like this picture. Forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain. The midbrain is responsible for our notion of survival. When somebody talks about being activated and anxious, that's the midbrain lighting up. Inside that midbrain is a little almond-shaped mass of cells called the amygdala. And when it is lit up, it enhances our need for flight, fight, and freeze. Our survival feels threatened. Down in the hindbrain, the lower part, that's where autonomic functioning lives. Heart rate, breathing. We don't have to tell our lungs to inflate. We don't have to tell our heart to beat. This part of the brain controls that. Unfortunately, when somebody overdoses on alcohol, benzodiazepines, or opiates, it is exactly that part of the brain that shuts down, and it quits telling those organs and those functions to work. The forebrain is our adult brain. So when somebody's midbrain becomes hijacked by substances or by another coping strategy, that strategy can become equated with a survival need. And when we think about what people will do to protect a survival need, we might become a little bit more sympathetic to what our people whose brains are hijacked are doing as well. When somebody's brain is hijacked, they will lie, steal, manipulate, badger, bully, all of those things if it's for survival and the forebrain isn't working. So what do we see when we see substance use or other compulsive behaviors affecting somebody's life? We see the changes in their lives, we see the changes in their behavior, but we don't get to see the inside. We don't see this neural network developing, which becomes like a railroad track on all about that coping strategy. So what we hear instead are lies, and they answer evasively. They engage in frequent blaming because it's like a magic act. If you get somebody to look over here, the girlfriend, the job, the boyfriend, the house, the pandemic, the something else, we're not looking at that. And it is only when the IP, the identified person, and the family or the support structure looks squarely at what is really going on, will change have a chance. So people with behaviors that are unhealthy often keep distance from family members. They don't talk about meaningful subjects, maybe. They deny, display a change in morality. Somebody who once was very, very cautious about human relationships is now going out to bars and picking up strangers. They are expressing a change of goals. We see that they start to lack planning skills, in fact. So the neural changes happen sort of like this. Drugs and alcohol alter dopamine, which is our feel-good chemical, and other chemicals such as serotonin and norepinephrine. And these are all the neurochemicals, including actually oxytocin, which moderate, stabilize, and elevate mood. Falling dopamine registers in the brain as unpleasant and stimulates craving for something to elevate the level. Drug use can interfere. Excuse me, 1 second. Little glitch. I had a brain glitch. I thought I wasn't recording. Drug use can interfere with the production of dopamine through the process of homeostasis, meaning if I'm getting all of my dopamine pushed and elevated and enhanced, frankly, through substances like cocaine and alcohol and methamphetamine and benzodiazepines, if my dopamine is elevating as a result of the use of those, it is elevating in such a degree that my brain gets lazy. It stops producing those chemicals for itself. So the drug use in and of itself interferes with the endogenous production of our own pleasure chemicals. And what we also know is that substance use as a method of eliminating pain without addressing pain works for a while. And drugs and alcohol can be an obvious answer in our culture. So what are they medicating? What are our IPs medicating? What are our families medicating? Our culture medicating? Could be physical pain, emotional pain, death of a close friend, COVID-19, a pandemic, isolation, dumped by a major love or a close friend, expectation of perfection. It can be just about anything that people are medicating. It can be as simple as failure to fit in socially because their brains are wired just a little bit different. So what are they medicating? Are they trying to get high? Are they trying to get drunk? Not necessarily. In the language of Gabor Mate, who wrote a book called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, they are medicating pain. All substance use disorders are born of pain, according to Dr. Mate. So because of that born of pain, we note that there are payoffs. Somebody might experience social ease at a party, stronger sense of belonging, reduction in anxiety for a period of time, an outlet of risk-taking. There are those people who are born with those risk-taking genes, the ones who ski over the tips of their skis and you yelp with abandon. Substance use can be equated with a way of engaging in risk-taking behavior. They may reduce inhibitions for somebody who is performing and provide an excuse for lack of functioning. So this quote by James Brown, not Get Down James Brown, but a different James Brown, basically says it. Drunk, you find yourself smarter and funnier and stronger and braver and even better looking. For a budding alcoholic, booze seems to do more for you than it does the others, and your only regret is that you didn't come across this magic potion sooner. And that's what it's like. So we have somebody with an genetic predisposition. Yes, people do engage in more likely addictive behavior if they grow up with a genetic strain. Fathers who have sons, fathers with alcohol issues are 4 times more likely to have sons with alcohol issues, even if they're not currently drinking. We don't know the exact level of genetic predisposition, but we do know that it's an element, a component of addiction and substance use disorders. So we have an individual with this predisposition for addiction. They use drugs or alcohol because our culture says use drugs or alcohol because it numbs pain for a little while. They find pleasure or relief in the experience. They continue using it and use it in the exclusion of other coping strategies because it works big and it works frequently. And for a while, it almost answers almost every question for them. They discover the benefits. No more racing thoughts. I can be myself at school. I can relax at the end of the day. The trauma of what I hear all day is lessened. They start gravitating from non-using friends because non-using friends are actually highlighting for them what they know or subconsciously know is becoming a problem. And every time they're using, every time they're thinking, when can I have that next drink? When can I buy that next ounce? When can I get that next fix? Their brains are changing. And for a while it does work. And for a while it works until it doesn't, until everything sort of collapses. And if we're lucky, if they're in a subset of people, they go to primary treatment, if they're lucky. What we know is that 10% of people who need substance use disorder treatment get it, 10%. So let's imagine they get to be in that lucky 10%. What we also know is that in and of itself, a 30-day program, a 45-day program, even a 90-day program is not enough. They come out of treatment. They have to learn how to live differently, change associated habits, change thinking, because changing thinking is changing brain, change their friends, change their goals, function in the world, cope with stress, struggle, and pain, change just about everything. And that is huge. And nobody can do that alone. One of the very, very reasons that anonymous groups are so successful, in addition to a multitude of other components, is there are people doing it together. They are swimming upstream in this culture of addiction together in community and fellowship. So when somebody doesn't, we see that they start losing the capacity or losing the skills that adulthood presents. So here is an adult functioning assessment. They have good self-esteem. They're able to accept advice. They have an even temper. They're sexually responsible. They don't wear a mask to please. They assume responsibility for their own recovery. They have the capacity for self-reflection and insight. What we know is that when somebody walks into a treatment program, they rarely can check most of these boxes, regardless of age. They've stopped behaving in ways that are consistent with that third part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is all about planning, moral development, skills to delay gratification. This is the part we really see hijacked by addiction. So a brain without a functioning prefrontal cortex sounds a little bit like this. Go ahead, steal the necklace. She never wears the necklace anyway. She'll never know it's missing. You can drink and drive, drunk driving laws. They're for amateurs. You're a pro. A functioning prefrontal cortex would sound more like this. Yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo, you drink and drive. You might hurt somebody other than yourself. You put a needle in your arm. You might die. That voice is quiet. It's like the old angel and devil on the shoulder. A functioning prefrontal cortex sounds like Mary Poppins. A hijacked prefrontal cortex sounds like Lucifer. So this is what happens when the brain has been hijacked. We lose the ability to function like an adult. And what does healing take? Time, a ton of time. Time, more time. The American Society of Addictive Medicine is talking about years now. Was 6 months, then it became a year. Now we know that neuroplasticity and all of that brain changing we're talking about takes a couple of years. It takes a couple of years. Early recovery is a minimum of 2 years now. And in addition to that, they need to be abstinent from euphoria creating substances, developing a program of recovery so that the brain is changing, find a way for fellowship and guidance and brain retraining, and a structure of healthy functioning, and even a spiritual foundation, because it is really hard to go through life without some kind of meaning for life struggles. So all of these things in combination are the things we see with people with long-term recovery. They're not looking for euphoria outside of themselves. They engage in a program of recovery of some form. They have fellowship, guidance, or mentoring because they recognize that their particular brains may not be safe neighborhoods all the time. They engage in brain retraining. They engage in healthy functioning emotionally and physically, and they develop a meaning for struggle. So that's them. Let's take a 2-minute break for those of you who are live. And I'm going to stop video for, no, I'm going to stop recording, pause recording, and open it up to any questions before we move on to the next segment. Now we're coming to part 2. Not what's happened to the 25 million who struggle with the disorder, but instead the 100 million Americans who are struggling with somebody else's struggle. What happens to them? Every family, whether they ever sipped a drop of alcohol, inhaled a hit of weed, took a pill, lived a fully functional, healthy life, if they've got somebody who's struggling with a substance use disorder, they're on a new journey. Some people report that that journey is like living on a strange planet. And it can be said that it is continuous trauma for a family. They start falling into behavior patterns to cope with the idea of living with somebody who is unpredictable, living with somebody that you don't know whether they're coming home at night sober or stoned. You don't know whether they're going to be full of temper or full of glee. And you start trying to control all of the parameters around them to try and get the behavior that feels safe. And we ignore the obvious while we're doing that. So family members adjust. They really do. They adjust their definitions of normal and acceptable and functioning in adulthood and adjust their expectations of the relationship. All the while, they're engaging in denial, all the same while. So what does that look like? And the best way I know how to describe this is in the early 90s, Newsweek came out with an article that said, if you are a woman and you are over 30 and you are single and you are not interested in being single, your odds of finding a man were less than being killed by a terrorist. This was in Newsweek. And women all over the country were in a furor over this, in an uproar. I, who was over 30, single, and really didn't want to be, was miserable by this news. So I went to visit my brother, and he said, in the way only big brothers can, who are teasing their little sisters, even when they're in their 30s, looks like you're going to have to find Plan B, Diana. And when I stopped crying, we decided to watch Saturday Night Live. And Saturday Night Live, of course, had to do a riff on this particular article. And they had a dating game. And the dating game was this beautiful woman picking from these 3 loser guys that only Saturday Night Live could create, John Belushi, and picking nose and scratching their bottoms and belching on the screen. And the name of the dating game was, you've got to lower your standards. And that's what happens with families. They lower their standards, and every time they lower and adjust their definitions of what's acceptable or the relationship, they're engaging in denial because the measure just changed. So what does evidence of adjustment look like in a family system? Here are some of these things. This is an assessment. I have families that I work with do. I tolerate dishonesty or theft. Well, it's only $50. I let myself be badgered and bullied. I just was too tired to fight. I no longer expect to be treated with respect. I blame my addicted loved ones, drug and alcohol use on others. I make excuses for my addicted loved one all the time. I do more, they seem to do less. And one of the telltale signs for some family members that they have crossed the line and started adjusting and allowing too much is the other family members are angry all the time. Angry not necessarily with the IP, but with the adjusting family member. Because what most families have is one person in that family system, one person who is able to see the truth. And they are holding up that mirror for the others saying, look at this, look at this. And this image of, no, I don't want to see this, is what our psyches often use. It's not a character flaw. Our psyches use the skill or mechanism of denial and our continual adaptations to make dysfunctional behavior seem normal so that we can stay safe or appear to be safe and out of pain. But the cycle of dysfunction actually results more in something like this. The more we deny, the more we do. Because if we're living with somebody or we are loving somebody, the jobs of that family do not change. There is a quantifiable number of things that have to get done in a family. And as our expectations reduce and the IP is no longer doing them, we start doing them. We start doing them. If they used to set their alarm clock and they no longer do that, we become the alarm clock and they become sleeping. As they do less, we do more. As they do lesser still, we do more still until everybody falls down. They go to treatment and they have to try and change everything. But what about us? What about the remaining 100 million? If you think of this as a family, and if the IP goes off to treatment, and these other 4 people do not change the way they operate, what they do to celebrate holidays, the way they embolden bad behavior, the way they do not talk about feelings or celebrate simple things, or a million other things that may influence this person's substance use disorder. When this person comes back out of services, out of support, and comes fully into that fold, they're going to be pulled to relapse into that thinking. And for them, that may be harmful. So this is my initial introduction to overfunctioning, underfunctioning behavior. And it started when my son, the clearer picture on the left, was in the 3rd grade. And I got called in by the teacher with a full finger wag. You are doing too much for your son. He is a mess. And I was like, oh God. Having been in complete denial about this, she said he doesn't organize his own belongings. He expects things to be brought to him. He has no frustration tolerance. He has no emotional control. And what she didn't say, but she said, and it's your fault. I left that meeting and, of course, got into the car, hung my head, and vowed to change, because I was teaching all of these things by this point, by the way. So this was the case of those who can't teach. I was overfunctioning massively for my child's perceived fragilities, and I was harming him. So the next day I proceed to say, no more, not doing it anymore. I put his sneakers next to his backpack. I let him put in what was in the backpack. And I said, honey, we've got a new general in town and it's not me. We drive off to school. From the back seat, I hear, I forgot my sneakers and it's gym day. You need to go get them. And I said, well, no, you're going to have to make it through the day without them. He said, what do you mean? I have moon boots on. And I said, well, you can make it through without them. You can play in your socks. They don't let you play in your socks anymore, Mom. They haven't done that in decades. It's dangerous. I'm going to be stuck in moon boots all day long. And I said, well, you'll survive. And this is killing me. My stomach is beginning to knot. And then he does it. And he said, I'm going to be playing volleyball in moon boots. I'm going to be a klutz. I'm going to wind up being bullied. And it's going to be your fault. And my stomach almost gave way. And I almost said, okay, just this last time. But I also know that that message, beware of just this one time, was also emblazoned in my brain. So I said, no. He gets out of the car. I spend the whole day pretty much waiting for the bad mommy police to call. Did you know your son's being bullied because you didn't prepare him? So that didn't happen. And at the end of the day, I hear him clomp up the stairs to the back deck. And I race to greet him from the full length of the house. And he looks at me sort of bemused. And he said, what's going on? And I said, how was your day? Really concerned. He'd had a horrible day. He said, fine, what's to eat? And I learned that day. I learned, number one, that the more we do for them, we may be harming them, that we may think they're miserable about a multitude of things, and they may even share that they're miserable with us about a multitude of things. And yet, when they hang up the phone, push send on the text, whatever, they may start to feel better. And we, as family members, may be left with that feeling. So, because just as those with the substance use disorders change, families change. We start changing our neural networks. We change our sympathetic nervous systems and overactivate our fight, flight, and freeze response because we are so scared of death. When our sympathetic nervous system is overactivated, we begin to make irrational decisions rather than wise ones. And so we need to work on our stress response in order that we are not engaging in similar behavior or similar decision making as the person whose brain has been hijacked by substance. Siblings. There's a book called Sober Siblings, and this is a quote basically describing that they feel disappointed, robbed of what might have been a lifelong intimate relationship, guilty that they escaped the disease. An active addict will never be a peer to somebody, sibling or not. The fear that you will always be taking care of them is omnipresent. So hence the need for family recovery. Number one, family members become addicted to that control and rescuing behavior to manage their fear and pain because their parasympathetic nervous systems have been hijacked. And every time that dysfunction, every time that decision making is in such a way that it protects the status quo instead of shaking it up, the behavior has a better chance of continuing. And then it becomes habitual. There's lots of reasons that people become what is called codependent in this field. I'm not going to go into that right now, but there's lots of beliefs that fuel it. Beliefs that they can control it. Belief that struggle is harmful. Guys, struggle is not harmful. Struggle is how we learn. that it is loving to rescue others, that it is unloving not to answer the phone. Sometimes it is the most loving thing we can do to let somebody struggle with their own feelings. We have the misconceived notion that all they might need is a good girlfriend or boyfriend or job, and they'll stop using. These are things that fuel family dependence because we seek to control the uncontrollable. And we engage in what is called protecting behavior. In the industry of substance use disorders, you often can hear the word enabling. I don't use that word when I'm working with families because it feels like what the teacher did to me, that big finger wag. It is the word that says you enabled, you caused, you supported. And there is truth in all of that. What I like to think of it as is the alleviation of consequences of the maladaptive behavior or the unhealthy behavior. And instead of using enabling, I use protecting. We're seeking to protect something, like our relationship with them. We're seeking to protect their futures. We're seeking to protect sometimes their life. We're seeking to protect 100 other valuable things. But the way we're choosing to protect them has the result of protecting dysfunction or the disorder. So it is misdirected action. It's not bad action. We might protect an illusion of them. We might protect our own addiction instead of looking at the truth, protect our image of ourselves, their futures. And one of the ways is we protect dysfunction. We do it in a bunch of different ways, or we can call it just protecting behavior. Bail them out of jail over and over. Listen to them whine about the unfairness of life when life is fundamentally not particularly fair for anybody. Purchasing drugs or alcohol for them, taking over all their responsibilities, keeping really lethal behavior a secret, lying to others on their behalf. That is protecting the dysfunction from coming to the light and being cared for. And then there is the part where we just do too much. Sorry he's late for work, parents say. We forgot to brush his teeth. This is a factual story. I was doing a workshop for a group where one mother said she stood at the door with the toothbrush in hand, with the toothpaste on the toothbrush, gently dampened, and held it and brushed his teeth as he smiled, and he was in his 20s. Again, we do too much. So what is the process of change? What do we do to change all of this? There is the concept of healthy boundaries. We protect ourselves. We look at the ways we want our relationships to be. We do a little values analysis. Do we want our families to be hijacked by the least healthy member of them? Do we want to protect our sanity and our peace, our money, and even our emotions? We need to do a little bit of work to ascertain, number one, what we want to protect and how we're going to protect it that doesn't imprison us. I like to think of boundaries like garden gates: open, close. When somebody is actively engaging in healthy behavior and not being disrespectful, not asking for things that we can't give, the gate opens. When they're asking for things that are not healthy for them, when they're asking for us to collude with their disorder, when they're asking for us to pay for that disorder, the boundary closes. So, 4 questions that can help us ascertain when we want to set a boundary in place or when we want to back off. Ring, ring. Hello. I just got a C, and the only way I'm going to get a B is if you go buy me a book and bring it to me. These are the 4 questions. Whose problem is it? Theirs, clearly. Who grows if I solve the problem? If I go buy the book so he can go from a C to a B, what am I depriving him of? The lesson of forethought. What do they gain if I stay out of it? Consequences that I didn't have to impose, guys. Most of the things that people will gain when we stay out of taking over their lives is growth. Growth from lessons, growth from feeling like, wow, I just did something difficult. Wow, I can do something difficult, because every time we solve a problem for somebody else, we are depriving them of a sense of self-efficacy. We're interfering. We might be meddling, but we are certainly not giving them the space to resolve it. So, whose problem is it? Who grows if I solve the problem? If the answer is you and not them, you need to look at what will they be deprived of if I solve that problem? And lastly, what do they gain if I stay out of it? And if boundaries are still really an issue, take a yellow sheet of paper, draw a fat line down the middle, put my responsibility, their responsibility, the treatment I'll pay for, my responsibility, their recovery program, their responsibility, what behavior I'm willing to support, my responsibility, how to resolve their problems, their responsibility, our recovery, their recovery, with whom we speak, our business. Growing up, their business. The more we try to grow up for somebody, the less likely it is to happen. So, anchors of boundary setting. 4, I love the number 4. Number 1, make the boundary specific. If you drink and drive, I can't let you use my car. Specific, reasonable. I think that's reasonable. The boundary is reasonable. You drink and drive, you can't have access to my car. Is it enforceable? Yes, it's my car. And is it logically related to the goal of not having them engage in the behavior? Yes. Where we tend to get in trouble is if you don't talk to me with respect, I will withdraw a privilege that has nothing to do with that behavior. A boundary about respect would be naturally related to the fact that you wouldn't talk with them while they're talking to you disrespectfully. When you talk to me disrespectfully, I'm going to need to walk away or hang up the phone. Specific, reasonable, enforceable, and logically related to the goal. So, if families stop here, they are not in denial. They know what boundaries look like. They're no longer protecting their loved ones from dysfunctional behavior. They can still remain sick. They can still live with anxiety because they're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And even endanger the relationships with the IPs who might be getting healthier than they are. So, what is family recovery? Acceptance. Acceptance is no more or less than the existing reality that we cannot and do not control another's recovery or ultimately the decisions of their life. So what I ask families to do is evaluate the ways you seek to control them. Are the dreams your loved one has for their life their dreams? Are their dreams your dreams? So here is the letter of resignation I have used in the past. Dear Odysseus, I now realize that my behavior and attitudes towards you and your struggles have not always been helpful. Therefore, I resign from the following: being preoccupied with your problems, trying to control you, caretaking you, worrying constantly about you, protecting you from the consequences of your actions, snooping in your life, shaming or blaming you, walking on eggshells around you and your disease, assuming responsibility for your recovery, protecting you, being a martyr. I give this letter to you as a gift for both you and me so that you can manage your recovery and I can manage mine. My wish is we both have full lives. I love you. And that's the essence of what we're looking at. We're looking at a family system working on their individual issues so that they're supporting growth, supporting transparency, and staying in their own lanes. So in order to do that, in order to get there, there's a whole ton of self-forgiveness that happens. And not just for the IPs. We look at a substance use disorder and we look at all the behavior that the person with the disorder has engaged in, and we think, yeah, they're going to have to engage in a lot of self-forgiveness or a lot of amend making. But the truth is that we all have a lot of self-forgiving to do. Some of us have tried to control in ways that were ugly. Some of us have blamed and judged our loved ones for the disease and not just for the behavior. Some of us have bought them things to make them happy, thinking that if all I could do was make them happy, they'll be well. Allowing my fear to control my behavior, drinking or drugging with them to make them feel less alone, ignoring the trauma that perpetuated the problem, being verbally or physically abusive to my loved one because I got so frustrated, numbing myself, staying away from home, a million other ways we coped. We're going to have to forgive ourselves for in order for the system to be well. And that's the gift of recovery, because the process is one of change. And our brains change. That's the other gift. Thought, neuron, firing, focus on good, another neuron fires and it connects. Embed it and it connects even better. Thought, focus on the good, because our brains are built like Teflon for the good. If we want to change our brains in a positive direction, we need to give it effort. We are not going to remember that unbelievable scent of gardenia unless we make effort to do so. Thought, focus on the good, embed it. Develop a neural network of good, present, positive moments, because only in doing that do we have any hope of competing with the relentless worry that is always part and parcel of somebody who is loving somebody with active addiction. So what we think as family member success is going to look like for somebody who goes off to treatment or engages in recovery, even for a significant period of time, we think it's going to look like this, when it really looks like that, full of plateaus and regressions and back to the middle and up. It's more like a sprung spring of growth than a straight line, guys. And now this is a video that
a very happy brain.
it's a short one, but worth watching.
Friends, this is the story of how Broody, a very unhappy brain, became very happy. You see, Broody struggled with fear and self-doubt. He felt unsafe and unworthy. He didn't know what to do. Then Broody's friend suggested an idea. Together, they went to school to learn about the brain and about themselves. Come, let's find out what they learned.
A short course in happiness. Your brain has trillions of junctions that magic millions of its functions. Let's learn about 3 traits of the brain that in overdrive can get you drained. First trait, your brain feels others' pain as its own. Your brain hurts just the same, in personal or beloved's pain. The same neurons fire when you are in despair and when someone else is hurting about whom you care. Second trait. For your brain, imaginary is real. Your brain lights up the same nerve bundles for events real or imagined stumbles. If you dream of a spider on your shin, it might cause the same dread as the real thing. Third trait. The brain can't tell physical pain from emotional hurts. The pain of a mean scorn stings the same as agony of a hurtful thorn. Broken bone and broken heart both cause the same smart. Millennia ago, the spiritual minds described in their devotions, hymns, and rhymes the same truths that the scientists of today write in theses, books, journals, and essays. What do they all say? To find inner contentment and plenitude, snug yourself in the comfort of gratitude. Your greatest joys come from passions that are lush with true and deep compassion. Once you're lost in healing others and start seeing strangers as brothers, your brain will become the happiest of all, be it summer, spring, winter, or fall. When you pray for others, share their feeling. In touching their lives, you will find healing. Help others feel safe and cherished. The joys in your brain will surely flourish. If you agree, then don't wait. Don't miss the feast, nor leave it to fate. Start with the one a breath away. In this moment, now, today. Start with the one a breath away. In this moment, now, today.
Broody the brain came back from school with two important concepts. First, seeing others in pain, physical or emotional, fires his own pain network. And second, his imaginary fears cause him real damage. The school also taught him solutions to these neural predispositions through cultivating deeper gratitude and compassion. The daily practice of gratitude and compassion made Broody happier and stronger than ever. He defeated fear and self-doubt and then felt safe and worthy. The brains that feel safe and worthy become happy. Happy brains, when they get busy in meaningful, creative, and altruistic activities, become very happy. Here is the secret to a happier life. Because of the way your brain operates, the pursuit of gratitude and compassion will make you happier than the pursuit of happiness.
Thank you for your attention. A very happy brain.
So that is the formal portion of this. I'm stopping the video. Let's have a conversation. Oops. I stopped the video.